America's crime crisis is worrying, but don't take my word for it. I'm not a judge. Judge Judy is. TV's Judge Judy Sheindlin says she's very aware of the chaos unfolding on streets across America and also knows exactly how we got there. Watch this.
Judy Sheindlin, the woman the world knows as Judge Judy, spent 25 seasons handing down verdicts with a sharp tongue that made her one of the highest-paid personalities on American television. Behind that famous bench sat a woman who buried her father, nearly lost her marriage, and rebuilt her whole identity before the cameras ever found her. At 83, she is finally letting people see the parts of her story that were never about the gavel. And once you hear what she went through to get here, you will understand why this woman never once let the world see her flinch. The Brooklyn girl who refused to sit down. Before she was Judge Judy, she was just Judith Susan Blum, a sharp-mouthed kid from Brooklyn raised by a dentist father named Murray and an office manager mother named Ethel. Nobody in that house was famous. Nobody was rich. What they had instead was the kind of stubborn, no-nonsense energy that Brooklyn seems to hand out for free, and Judy carried it with her everywhere she went. She wanted to be a lawyer at a time when almost nobody expected that from a woman, and the world made sure she knew it. While studying at New York Law School, one professor looked her dead in the eye and asked why she was taking up a seat that belonged to a man who would eventually need to support a family. Can you imagine sitting through that, swallowing it, and still walking across the stage as the only woman in your graduating class? That is exactly what happened. In 1965, Judy graduated from New York Law School as the sole woman in her class, a fact confirmed in her official biography detailing her early legal career and law school years. She did not slow down after that. She married her first husband, Ronald Levy, and had 2 children, Jamie and Adam, while trying to balance motherhood with a career that most people around her treated like a hobby rather than a calling. That word, hobby, followed her for years, and it stung every single time. Ronald simply could not see her work as anything more than something she did on the side. And eventually, that disconnect became too heavy to carry. The marriage ended in 1976, and Judy walked away from it with 2 kids and a decision she never regretted. By 1972, she had already become a prosecuting attorney in New York City's family court, spending her days on child abuse cases, domestic violence, and juvenile crime, the kind of work that leaves a mark on anyone who takes it seriously. She was not doing paperwork in a back office. She was standing in rooms where broken families tried to put themselves back together, listening to children describe things no child should ever have to describe, and she built her reputation for toughness right there, long before any camera crew showed up. 10 years of that kind of work does something to a person. It either breaks you or it hardens you into someone who refuses to be shocked by anything, and Judy clearly chose the second path. Anyone who worked alongside her during those years quickly learned the same lesson. This was a judge who had little patience for excuses, especially in a courtroom where the decisions being made could shape a child's entire future. She understood that every case carried consequences far beyond the legal arguments presented before her. Behind every file was a child, a family, and often a difficult situation that required more than simply following the easiest path. She was not sitting on the bench to win popularity contests, and she certainly was not interested in making decisions simply because they would be well received. Her priority was fairness, even when fairness meant making a decision that angered people or attracted criticism. In her view, being liked and being right were 2 completely different things. That distinction between seeking approval and standing by what she believed was just would become one of the defining principles of her career. Then, in 1977, everything shifted again. She met a defense attorney named Judy Sheindlin at a bar in what has become one of the most retold meet-cute stories in daytime television history. A chance encounter later laid out in detail across her full biography, covering her marriages, children, and career timeline. They married that same year, and life, for a while, looked like it was finally slowing down enough for her to catch her breath. But here is the thing about Judy Sheindlin's life. It never really slows down. Every time things looked settled, something bigger came along and knocked the ground out from under her. And what came next would test her marriage in a way nobody saw coming. At 83 years old, Judy Sheindlin has finally opened up about the years she spent quietly grieving while the whole world only saw the sharp-tongued judge on television. Nobody watching her hand-down verdicts had any idea what she was carrying underneath that black robe. Stick around, because the next part of her story is the kind that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about the woman behind the bench. The loss that almost ended a marriage. In 1990, Judy's father died, and that loss cracked something open in her that 13 years of marriage to Jerry had never touched. He was more than a parent to her. She once called him her champion, the person who had believed in her before anyone else did. And losing him did not just bring grief, it brought a kind of exhaustion that she had never allowed herself to feel before. She needed her husband to step up in a way he had never been asked to before, and he simply did not know how. For 12 years, she had been the one holding things together, managing the household, raising children, building a career, while also being the emotional backbone of the marriage. Now she needed the roles reversed, and Jerry, then 55 years old and set in his ways, could not seem to find his footing. Judy later admitted she told him plainly that she had spent over a decade taking care of him, and it was now his turn to take care of her. Jerry was not being cruel. He was, in his own words, totally unaccustomed to that kind of role. A struggle he described honestly years later in interviews that unpacked exactly how close the marriage came to falling apart, detailed in a Fox News retrospective on the crisis that nearly ended their relationship. But understanding does not always fix things in the moment, and Judy was not in a place to wait around for him to catch up. She gave him an ultimatum, plain and simple, telling him that unless he could figure out how to change, the marriage could not continue. They separated. Divorced, actually, in 1990, right in the middle of one of the hardest years of her life. Think about that for a second. She had just lost her father, the man who shaped who she became, and instead of leaning on her husband, she was filing paperwork to end her marriage to him. That is not a small thing. That is two forms of grief happening at once, stacked on top of each other, with no time to breathe between them. But somehow, this is not where their story ends. Jerry, recalling that painful stretch years later, admitted just how real her ultimatum had been, remembering that she told him unless he could maneuver through it, she was going to divorce him. A moment he revisited candidly in the same retrospective piece tracing their entire relationship from that bar meeting to remarriage. Whatever shifted in him during that year apart, it worked. They remarried in 1991, and instead of walking away from each other for good, they built something even sturdier out of the wreckage. That kind of loss does not just disappear once you reconcile. It reshapes how two people love each other for the rest of their lives. And for Judy and Jerry, it clearly did. She has spoken since about how that year apart changed the way she saw partnership altogether. It was not about punishing Jerry for failing her. It was about refusing to spend the rest of her life feeling invisible inside her own marriage. And once she made that boundary clear, everything between them started to look different. Grief has a strange way of showing people exactly who they married. And for Judy, that painful year taught her something she carried into every decade that followed. She stopped expecting Jerry to read her mind, and she started saying plainly what she needed, a habit that would go on to define not just her marriage, but her entire public persona in the courtroom. The same directness that saved her relationship with Jerry is the exact same quality that made millions of viewers fall in love with her on television a few years later. Even now, decades removed from that painful chapter, Judy rarely talks about her father without her voice softening just slightly, a small crack in the armor that fans almost never get to see. It is easy to forget, watching her cut someone off mid-excuse on television, that this same woman once lost the person who believed in her before anyone else did, and had to learn how to keep standing anyway. Building an empire while guarding her heart. Here is where most people think they know Judy Sheindlin's story, but the truth is bigger than the courtroom drama and the catchphrases. After her father's death and her brief separation from Jerry, Judy did not retreat from public life. She threw herself into it, and by 1982 she had been appointed a judge in the Bronx Family Court, a role that would eventually make her one of the most recognized legal figures in America. Her television career began almost by accident after a 1993 newspaper profile caught the attention of producers, which eventually led to a segment on 60 Minutes, and, not long after, her own show. Before any of that, she had already published her first book, a collection of hard-nosed lessons from the family court bench that first put her name in front of a wider audience. Judge Judy premiered in September 1996 and ran for an extraordinary 25 seasons, becoming the highest-rated court show on television for a quarter of a century, airing more than 12,000 episodes before it finally wrapped in 2021. The money that came with that success was staggering, and by 2018, she had become the highest-paid television host in the world, pulling in a reported $47 million in a single year for hosting Judge Judy and producing Hot Bench, on top of selling the rights to her library for another $100 million. As of 2026, her estimated net worth sits around $440 million, a figure built entirely from decades of unglamorous, disciplined work, a total confirmed in a recent breakdown of her career earnings and current financial standing. But success like that comes with a cost most fans never see. Judy has always called discussing her own finances unseemly, and she has spent decades guarding her private life fiercely, refusing to let cameras into the parts of her world that mattered most. While the rest of daytime television chased tabloid drama, she kept her marriage, her grief, and her family largely out of the spotlight, only letting bits of it slip through in carefully chosen interviews. And even now, decades into her career, the recognition keeps arriving. Earlier this year, Judy was named the recipient of the Broadcasters Foundation of America's 2026 Edward F. McLaughlin Lifetime Achievement Award, an honor set to be presented in Los Angeles that celebrates influence stretching far beyond simple ratings, a milestone confirmed in an AOL report on her latest broadcasting honor. Most people her age are winding down. Judy Sheindlin is still collecting Lifetime Achievement Awards. So while it looks from the outside like nothing but wins and paychecks, the truth is that every bit of that empire was built by a woman who had already survived losing her father, nearly losing her marriage, and clawing her way into a profession that once questioned whether she even belonged there. Every dollar, every award, every renewed contract came from a woman who refused to let grief or heartbreak slow her down. And that refusal is exactly what turned her into a household name. We have watched Judy Sheindlin hand down thousands of verdicts over the decades, always composed, always in control, never once letting the cameras catch her off guard. But behind that steady exterior was a woman quietly carrying the weight of everything she had already survived long before she ever sat down behind that bench. Keep watching, because what she reveals about the years ahead might be the most honest thing she has ever said publicly. That history is exactly why what comes next hits so differently. Facing new chapters at 83. Judy Sheindlin was born on October 21, 1942, which puts her at 83 years old as of this year, still working, still sharp, and still very much married to Jerry, who himself recently celebrated his 92nd birthday. That is nearly 5 decades of marriage between two people who once filed divorce papers on each other and somehow ended up growing old side by side anyway. Jerry's own story is worth pausing on for a second. Before he ever sat next to Judy at a bar in the 1970s, he had already served in the Army during the Korean War, earned a law degree from Brooklyn Law School, and built a career as a trial judge in the New York Supreme Court before later becoming a television arbitrator on the People's Court. A career arc laid out in a detailed profile covering his legal background and television work. Two people who spent their whole lives inside courtrooms somehow found their way to each other outside of one. Instead of slowing down, Judy kept going. After Judge Judy ended in 2021, she moved straight into Judy Justice, a streaming courtroom series that reportedly drew inspiration from her own granddaughter. And this year marks something bigger than just another season. 2026 quietly represents 30 years since Judge Judy first premiered back in 1996, a milestone tied directly to the newest season of her current show, a timeline confirmed in coverage of the show's 4th season and Sheindlin's career milestone. Most careers do not last 30 years. Hers has lasted 30 years and shows no sign of stopping. What makes all of this land so hard emotionally is not any single headline. It is the full picture: a woman who buried her father and nearly lost her marriage in the same breath, who fought her way into courtrooms that did not want her there, who built one of the most successful television careers in history, and who is still standing at 83, married to the same man who once could not figure out how to hold her through her grief, and who eventually learned how. She has said before that she and Jerry do not spend every hour together, calling that kind of constant closeness deadly for a marriage, and that she still likes to watch him walk into a room. After everything they survived, that small, quiet detail somehow says more than any award ceremony ever could. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is just two people who chose each other again and again, even after everything that tried to pull them apart. That is the real story behind the woman millions know only from behind a bench. Not the catchphrases, not the paychecks, the grief she carried, the marriage she almost lost, and the quiet, stubborn love that outlasted all of it. There is something almost humbling about watching a woman this accomplished still talk about her husband walking into a room the same way she might have talked about him 50 years ago. Fame did not change that. Money did not change that. Losing her father did not change that, even though it nearly cost her the marriage altogether. If anything, everything she went through only made that small moment mean more, because she knows firsthand exactly how easily it could have all disappeared. Judy has spent her whole career telling other people the hard truths they did not want to hear, sitting across from strangers and cutting straight through their excuses in under 5 minutes. But the hardest truth of her own life was never spoken from behind that bench. It was learned quietly, in a year of separation, in the grief of saying goodbye to her father, in a marriage she had to fight to save twice over. Nobody handed her any of it. She earned every single piece of the life she has now, the hard way. And at 83, she is still standing, still working, and still choosing the same man she once nearly walked away from. Maybe that is the real lesson buried underneath all the headlines about her net worth and her Lifetime Achievement Awards. Success does not protect anyone from grief. Fame does not make heartbreak easier to carry. What actually gets people through it is exactly what got Judy Sheindlin through hers: honesty, stubbornness, and someone willing to stay even after everything falls apart once. She found that in Jerry, lost it for a year, and somehow found her way back to it anyway. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.